Okay, good morning, Laurence. Welcome to the show, and good to see you as always.
Good morning, Ward. Good to see you as well.
I think I'd like to start in a place that I often do. So as with, it seems, so many people in this space, you've had quite a diverse path into the digital infrastructure industry, wearing lots of different hats in different subsectors and different types of organizations, from cloud service providers, private equity, through to your role today with NTT. For anyone who doesn't know you, can you maybe talk us through that and add a bit of context to that?
I'm actually an attorney by training and real estate and international law. I really did not want to pursue that as the primary focus, and got into real estate, commercial real estate, corporate real estate early on after graduating law school and passing the bar. Worked in location analysis, site selection, corporate headquarters relocation, things of that nature. There was a particular project I was brought in on where I was assigned the communications infrastructure role, and I had to learn all about fiber optic networks at that time. And so I ended up becoming very intrigued by it and ended up focusing on technology companies and telecommunications companies in the early 2000s. And that brought me into the, we'll call it the nascent data center, carrier, hotel, telecommunications industry, which is where it all began. And I soon ended up working with a private equity group to acquire and redevelop a data center in Chicago, as well as a fiber optic network. And once we sold that off, I became a principal in a telecommunications design, engineering, and construction management firm called SCO Group in Chicago, with other experiences touching small cell wireless and other technology-related properties. In 2017, I accepted a job with Microsoft and relocated to Seattle in site selection, where I ended up being the director of site selection in the Americas, as well as running the government and sovereign data center leasing program in the Americas and the global edge compute program called Azure Edge Zones. I left there just under 5 years later to become Chief Commercial Officer for Avio Digital Partners, who was developing greenfield data center campuses in North America and Europe. There was a little bit of a transition period where I was consulting on various projects and with various companies in the AI data center space. In May of this year, I joined NTT Global Data Centers as the Senior Vice President, Global Commercial Officer, where my remit is still several hats, including the global build-to-suit program, standing up and formalizing that, and commercial strategy, essentially working as a sort of hyperscale global overlay on various hyperscale and neo-cloud opportunities, including up to the 1 gigawatt campus type deployments.
It feels like whenever I've spoken to you over the years, I've always got the impression that that's something that you're quite passionate about. So can you maybe talk to me a little bit about what you enjoy about that international perspective?
That's a great question or direction there. From an early age, I was interested in it. I'm not exactly sure where that emanated from, but in law school, I actually studied for my certificate of comparative law in Lyon, France. I had a focus on international law in law school. And even when I was in this boutique corporate real estate firm, I did some international projects there as well. And just what I really liked about it is just I tend to like complex deals. I like learning about other cultures, how they do things, and it's just always been something that's intrigued me and just made things a little more interesting. Don't get me wrong, I love doing a large deal here in the United States and in our backyard, but international has always been something of interest to me. And NTT, as the third largest global data center platform, is just an ideal place for me to land to really kind of exercise that muscle.
totally get that. I love the fact this industry is such a tight-knit global space, and so definitely echo what you say there about the international work. If we focus on your role today, maybe talk about how you're seeing the industry evolve across different regions.
In the U.S., we're seeing, the size and scale of these projects just continue to balloon. It seems to be happening at a slower pace in Europe. We're seeing it really start to emerge in APAC. It seems as though that may catch up fairly quickly with the rest of the world. We're not seeing a ton of that in Africa. And just to clarify, so NTT has just over 160 data centers now in 21 countries, and so we're on 4 continents. And in Africa, we only have South Africa at the moment, and Johannesburg. So we're not seeing a huge amount of that in Johannesburg just yet, but certainly the U.S. is leading the pack. It feels like APAC may kind of surpass EMEA when it comes to some of these larger deployments with the Chinese hyperscalers and Chinese neoclouds versus what we're seeing in EMEA, other than in the Nordics.
I mean, I think you've touched on it there, but the reason that you feel as though Asia's going to surpass EMEA, is that driven by where the customers are? Is that a lot of it, or are there other? I'm sure there's other dynamics at play as well, but help me understand that a little bit better.
Well, I think it's definitely driven by the Chinese hyperscalers, who just seem to have an insatiable appetite right now. Specific to NTT, it's an interesting opportunity as we are the only real global data center platform that is not sort of American. And so due to certain geopolitical things happening right now, that's more attractive. So maybe we're just seeing more of that activity than the average bear. But, we're seeing just, Southeast Asia, Japan, and India now as well, really starting to see, larger requirements from multiple, not just the Chinese hyperscalers, but the big 3, I guess we'll call them big 4 or 5 now, when you start to see some of these newer entrants who are starting to look at APAC as well.
So you've talked a bit about North America, about EMEA, about APAC. I seem to remember from recent conversations we've had that Latin America might be a region that the business is looking to expand in. I don't think there's assets there today, but you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's obviously a region that's very close to my heart, given that I live in Peru, and I've recently put a full-time researcher onto that region myself because I know what's coming. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that?
The new region expansion is also within my remit. It's definitely on our roadmap. And I think we're going to be a little bit opportunistic about how we enter that market, where we're going to probably want some level of commitment from one of our clients. I don't know that we would just speculatively enter that market at this point. There's some acquisitions we've also potentially looked at, and I think that's probably a good time for me to mention that NTT is a publicly traded company. So anything I'm saying is kind of forward looking and is not binding on the business, and it's just really just my opinion.
With those emerging markets of LATAM and Africa that you've also mentioned, are there any trends that you see in terms of what you feel like the biggest unlocks are that are needed for regions like that to scale in a meaningful way?
We're starting to see AI adoption happening everywhere. And given the sheer numbers of people there and the growing GDP, that's going to drive some level of AI inference requirements. We have all of those tier 1 markets on our roadmap. And those go out, our roadmap goes well into the 2030s. And so, we're constantly reevaluating that, and certain sites, certain cities, metros move up based on certain metrics that we see. One other interesting thing about NTT Global Data Centers is that we're also part of NTT Data, and NTT Data has, as you're aware, a significant business globally where they have customers that they bring us opportunities as well. So we're seeing opportunities in all of those markets, and it's just a question of whether they rise to the level of justifying, the significant investment required for data center, region to be established there.
I think you're also, given your global role, you've got a really good vantage point to see how, and I would say this, we wouldn't be talking about data centers today if the topic of energy didn't come up today. So I do think you've got a good vantage point to see how that's playing out across the world as well. And I'd be keen to hear from you, like what you're seeing from that point of view, maybe particularly through the lens of access to renewable power.
There's always been a focus on sustainability, and that's a core value. And so we're always looking at, renewable opportunities and ways to do things more sustainably. So we are always considering sites where there is, lower carbon solutions or no carbon solutions. This recent push for behind the meter power is challenging that, particularly in North America where, natural gas is kind of in abundance and probably the easiest way to get sites up and running for bridging power. But there are ways to mitigate that with things such as renewable natural gas, like the dairy renewable natural gas, which, the carbon intensity. So one dairy renewable natural gas molecule can then neutralize 3 regular natural gas molecules to be carbon neutral. So there's ways to still use natural gas and be sustainable. So we're looking at all of those options, but certainly looking at solar where appropriate. Wind is not something we've done a lot of, but certainly looking at those things. Virtual PPAs are an opportunity, but it's really about the direct power usage that we want to make sure is sustainable and renewable wherever possible.
How are you seeing that play out in like Asia and EMEA in comparison to the States?
It doesn't seem to be quite as much a focus of the customers and clients there as it is here. It's still top of mind for us. So we constantly having those conversations with them about, how important is that and how do we still meet our carbon neutral goals? NTT has a goal of being, carbon neutral by 2030. Regardless of how they're looking at it, we still feel like we're stewards of the environment and what it is that we're building. So we're still bringing that, to the mix and kind of challenging some of the traditional ways they're doing things to make sure it complies with our vision.
I seem to remember I saw something in the industry press recently, or in the not too distant past anyway, about an IPO for NTT's Singapore REIT. I think it was roughly $1 billion. Can you maybe talk to us about the strategic rationale behind that?
The demands financially of the data center industry are just incredible right now. And everyone's looking at ways to raise money, recycle capital. And so this is just another vehicle to do so. So, NTT is, uniquely positioned in the data center industry as we receive funding right off the balance sheet from NTT, our parent company. So we're not going out to raise money each time. We have a significant, I believe the company is what $170 billion enterprise at this point, NTT Limited. But we looked at other ways to recycle capital, and one of them was to form a Singapore REIT where we took some stabilized data center assets and put it into that REIT vehicle. And we had the IPO a few months ago, and it raised just under $1 billion. We still retained a sizable equity percentage and still operate those assets And so it's an opportunity as we grow and develop more stabilized assets that those can be acquired by the REIT, and it's a way to recycle capital for future projects.
Great, yeah. And what do you think that's going to unlock for the business in terms of future growth, that model?
$1 billion doesn't go as far as it used to. So, if we do 1 or 2 assets a year, I'm just throwing that number out. That's not tied to any metrics that we've represented. We're able to recycle, a good chunk of that money. So it'll probably enable us to do, another 1 to 2 projects a year. At least in initial phases, initial data centers on a campus. We're also looking at other models like DevCos, where we can also bring in outside capital, particularly for the larger gigawatt campus type projects, so that we're not using just a vast majority of our equity and our dry powder on just one project. Being a global company, there's a lot of demands on our money. And we have to make sure that we're able to grow and scale in all the regions we're in and eventually new regions.
Yeah, and I suppose, no shortage of capital partners who are looking to partner up with developers like NTT as well on those kind of projects.
Very true. It's a name that's known. And, back even when I was at Microsoft, NTT was a company that everyone just had a certain comfort level with, that they were going to, deliver what they said they were going to, and they're going to be around. It's not, lease it and flip it kind of situation. So there's some comfort in that for people.
I'm going to close on the question that I always finish on, which is, in your opinion, maybe highlight any areas that you think people either aren't talking about or people just aren't talking about enough, but should be.
I would have to say that on my most recent trip to Singapore, I was at Data Center World there a couple weeks ago and spent some time with our APAC team. And it was really incredible to see what's happening with some of these Chinese hyperscalers. And, the speed in which they're building and the cost at which they're building, it's a little bit shocking compared to the U.S. market. And so I think that's something that we should all be keeping an eye on and looking at ways to be more efficient in how we're building. Their costs seem to be, almost half. This is what was quoted to us. It's not been demonstrated, but it was their build costs were almost half of what you're seeing in the U.S. per megawatt, and they're claiming to be able to deliver these data centers in under 12 months from go, and so that is a game changer. And I think we will be challenged here to start meeting those same types of timelines. If you're competing in that region, that's a real competitive threat. But I think that these prefabricated components and this modular building style is something that we're going to see proliferate throughout the world, and we're going to need to adapt and change if we want to be competitive globally.
Okay, well, look, really appreciate you finding the time to join me today. I know you're very active on the event circuit across the globe, so hope to bump into you at one of those in the not too distant future. But yeah, thanks very much for your time, Laurence.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks, Ward. Look forward to seeing you soon.